welcome everybody. My name's Gareth Nichols. I'm head of PMO at University Hospitals of North Midlands. I'm also the head of the Midlands Regional Network, and I spoke on the first session with Joe and Henry and Josh this morning. So thanks for everybody for joining. The session is promoting the conversation. How could the ICS become PMO ready? I think we debated whether we could flip that and talk about whether the PMO could be ICS ready, and I think we can look at it in both ways. Just as a little bit of background, I guess, in terms of where this session's come from, and then I'll introduce a few other people that are on the session as well. Throughout the networking sessions that we've had, both regionally and also through a number of the peer-to-peer discussions that we've had as network leads and through the ambassador and champion roles, the conversations around the ICS and the forthcoming shift to ICS is constantly coming up. So we decided that we'd basically put the feelers out to understand what the appetite was for creating a dedicated group to focus on how we can bring our knowledge, bring our resources, the same we're doing in our current networks together, but with a specific focus on the ICS and how we can help the shift to the ICS models moving forward. I'll talk a little bit more in a moment, but I will introduce the guys who are supporting the session. So delivering the session with me is Rachel. I'll let Rachel introduce herself.
Hi everyone. Yes, I'm here as the PMO operations manager for the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire ICS PMO. So we've sort of been we've came together in January, so we've had a little bit of experience of trying to navigate our way through what's happening with the ICS and how we should look as a PMO. In what ways is it the same and what ways is it different? So I don't know how far you wanted me to go with an intro, Gareth. A bit more, a bit less?
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, it would have been. We were hoping to have Phil, Ryan, and Liz Jones on as well to help facilitate some of the session. But obviously, I don't think they're on yet. But if they join, then we'll bring them in. And obviously, we've got Mike supporting the session as well. Mike, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Gareth. Yeah, so I'm Mike Gray. I work at Health Education England as a capability and resourcing manager. Yeah, so I'm just here to support the discussion really and get the most out of our time together. You may recall, for those that attended the 5-day festival in February, we had a discussion panel on ICSs. We had representatives from policy, from frontline, and from digital. I'll put a link into that chat for those that would like to see that, but very much a hot topic at the moment. So keen to kind of provide as much useful information, connect you with others as we can as we go through this, but this is really a good starting point. So yeah, thank you.
I just noticed as well in the chat, a gentleman called Paul Burridge has just commented that their CCG PMO is going to transition to the ICS PMO. So is that, and I probably should have said that's exactly the route that that I went through with our team. Paul came back from sort of testing and vaccination because we got dispersed, and it was like, well, CCG PMO, right? We're not doing like cost improvement this year. Go off and sort out what a PMO looks like for the ICS, and that was our mandate.
Yeah, so and I think well, that's exactly what we want to get out of this session, is to try and understand where people are at. We're all on a journey. It's a similar journey, but we're all at very different points in that journey. And the aim, the objective of this session is really to start to gather those views and opinions and to try and understand the potential benefits of forming this network group, and what that might look like, and how we will look to focus and direct that group, and obviously to encourage you guys out there to be part of that group, because it's, as we said from the beginning, this is all this has all been done on a voluntary basis. It's all our time being given up to drive this, and there's lots of passion, there's lots of resource and skill out there, and we want to use that and build on that. Obviously, the ICSs are coming. You know, we're all waiting to see what change happens in April. We know change happens on a cyclical cycle in the NHS. We see these changes coming and going. I think what's different this time is there's a couple of things. One being the impact of COVID. I know personally we've seen systems come together more than ever throughout COVID, and they've been working certainly better than I've seen in my short 10, 12 years of being involved in the NHS. We're seeing also systems actually being held to account and challenged nationally to deliver as a system, rather than targets being set specifically for the CCGs or for the acute providers. We're seeing those challenges being laid out at system level now. So I think in terms of the shift, we are seeing a bigger and more, I guess, more progressive change than I've certainly seen in the past. Some of the conversations that came up that drove the requirement for this, I think, was around the governance of the ICS models, and I know Rachel mentioned the change that their organisation went through. My organisation's in a different position altogether, and I think what we want to do is to try and understand where you guys are all at, and to understand firstly what organisations you were involved with, where you are in terms of an ICS, and what we can then, as I said before, what we can then do to try and help to make that transition to an ICS as smooth as possible and as successful as possible. Mike, did you get a chance to pull together the polls?
I did, yeah. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, I'm just going to pop it in the chat. Get involved. We've kind of set up three polls. I'm just going on the back of what Gareth has just described to you. Two are multiple choice. One is a word cloud. I've made the first one available. So what we're looking for here is just to understand who's on the call. I mean, most of you seem to have put some form of introduction in the chat. But what type of partner organisation are you from? So ICS, CCG, frontline service, a local authority, social services, or an arm's length body. So if you just take a moment to complete that for us. Get results in at the moment. Let me just share that with you. So 13 of you have responded so far. Frontline service seems to be the lion's share of those that are on this network session at the moment. Local authorities and social services. Obviously, the commitment that's around ICSs is to be closer to our local authorities and social service partners. So we are looking. There are gaps, and we know that. And I think this is just to sort of identify that and understand how we then take that forward. Great, 19 of you. Super. Okay, thanks very much. The next poll, what is your starting point? So what we were looking to gain from this was to understand what point are you in this journey in terms of you currently work in a PMO, you currently work in a system PMO, you don't have a PMO at all. In fact, some of you may not know what a PMO is, so it's just really to understand what your starting point is. I think Gareth alluded to that earlier, that there is an acknowledgement that everyone is at a different starting point in this journey, and that's okay. And you know, that you should be comfortable with that. It's just often not knowing who's where and who we can draw on for that experience and that shared learning. So I'm interested we've got 19 responses. What's your starting point? That other 26% of you. Just let us know. If you're welcome to pop your hand up if you are prepared to do that. Just let us know what your starting point is. Okay, well, looks like most of you, 61% of 23 people are currently working in PMO, which is good. And 13% of you don't work in a PMO at all. I'll be interested to know a little bit more about that. If any of you are prepared to let us know what kind of function or directorate you sit in.
Yeah, and hopefully, so after the polls, we're gonna open the floor as well, because this is the whole point of this session is about networking. We want to hear what you guys have got to say as well. So it'll be really interesting to understand where people are at, and we'll give a bit of a summary as to where we're at as well. Rachel and I will anyway, and then we'll open it up.
Great. Okay, the final one. It's a bit of a word cloud. So what's your views on the ICS at the moment? You can pop as many words in there as you like. Just really wanting a sense, a flavour for what this means to you and what it feels like. Leading up to today's network session, Gareth and Rachel, Faith and others had different feelings, mixed feelings towards it. So we just wanted to understand some of that. Daunting, vague and confused. Yeah, absolutely. I think there is certainly elements of that I'm hearing from those that I'm connected to at the moment. So foggy. Very foggy. Yeah. Complex. Yes, complexity. Absolutely. I think that's something that we actually captured an ideas board when we were building today's session, and a lot of these words were included in that. Actually, it is very foggy and it's confusing, and it's knowing who to go to for what you can and can't influence, what it means to you and those out in the system. Yeah, it can be very complex, who to involve, bit of red tape as well. Excellent.
And I think that's really interesting. I think I mean, as Mike said, this is exactly what we sort of expected, but it's interesting to see it come through. And I guess obviously, you know, the role of a PMO is there to provide governance and assurance. So all of those words that are coming off is what we would hope to try and remove. We would hope to try and tackle some of that by developing this network, a set of tools, a set of resources that can be used to help to control some of that and put some of that governance back in place.
That's great. Thanks very much for everyone that's contributed. I'll collate those and share those back to you all so you can have access to them if you wish. So thank you very much. I will stop sharing my screen now, Gareth, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Matt. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
And thanks to all those responded. And it's great to see so many people on now as well. The plan for the rest of the session, as I say, was Rachel and I we're going to give a little bit of a summary in terms of our current position in our roles and what our ICS looks like to us. And then we'd like to open it up for a discussion in terms of getting thoughts from you guys, and more importantly, getting ideas for how we can start to shape a network group and what benefits that may have and where we should focus some of that. If we run out of time, if we run out of effort, steam, then we will, obviously we're not going to drag the session out to 1 o'clock just for the sake of it, but we've got an opportunity, so it'd be great to use it. Rachel, do you want to go first?
Yep. Okay. So I suppose our journey, I talked a bit about, how we ended up doing it. It was literally a case of sort of pre-COVID, we were a PMO in the CCG, and the majority of what we were responsible for, making sure the governance was working and assuring was a cost improvement programme. Obviously, COVID came along. No one was interested in cost improvement at that point. So we got dispersed. Some of us went off to do testing. Some of us went off to do business continuity, and then latterly vaccination. So I came back from doing testing in January this year. As I said before, I arrived back and I was sort of told, we need to start thinking about what a system PMO looks like. The Chief Exec Board want a system PMO behind everything that's being developed. Go off and work out what one looks like. So that was a challenge. So we had lots of sort of things going on at the time. We were starting to develop plans for the new national planning process, and for the first time, we weren't developing a plan for on a 12-month perspective anymore. Now plans are being developed on a sort of with detail for year 1 and year 2, but sort of thinking longer term to 3 and to 5 years. And that was quite a big shift in thinking for a lot of people involved in the annual planning process, that no longer was it just about hitting that pound sign target saving on the 31st of March. We were actually now being actively encouraged to think about proper system transformation, all the things that we'd wanted to be able to do, so we could actually think about longer term transformation. And so that was new for a lot of the project managers. It was certainly new for a lot of the planners. So we had to shift our eyes away from kind of what efficiency meant. It wasn't all just about pound signs anymore. So what else did that entail? Obviously, a huge amount of work goes on across our system. We have a big teaching trust, NUH, and then we have another acute trust, Sherwood Forest. We have two community trusts. We have 2 local authorities. So there's a lot to bring together there as a system. And I would say one of the things that really helped at the beginning was we decided quite quickly what we were actually going to focus on. So we talked about a model, and we very much I proposed that we worked on a hub and spoke model where the system PMO was a hub, and then the PMOs in all the relevant organisations around us were the spokes. And that meant that we all worked on the same level. There was no sort of reporting up to the mothership sort of agenda within that, which I think it emphasised and embedded that message that that this was about partnership. We then looked at what we wanted our scope to be, which would be another thing I would say would be really important. Fairly quickly get your scope in place, because you know what we're like about scope in the NHS, it creeps off a cliff if you blink. So set your scope. And we decided that we would create a portfolio of our 16 biggest system transformation programs that were underway, and they would be programs that very much have a system perspective, that they are going to impact all or most of the organisations across our system. So that meant within the scope of that, we've got some very clear specific delivery programmes. And I noticed that Sarah Lockwood made a comment about, sort of how does it work for doing the transformation out in the providers. So the providers very much have their provider remit that they work to, and they, assure and govern, a lot of the day-to-day stuff, particularly if it's about elective recovery, because that's not part of the transformation portfolio. But it did help us to, set our scope out, sort of quite clearly, really. We have an ICS Outcomes Framework, but it's a bit old. It needs to be refreshed. And this is an opportunity to think as well about the outcomes, because another need for us that's jumped out is that as a system, we're not terribly good at benefits. identifying them, measuring them and demonstrating them, because it's always just been about the pound sign really, but now we actually have to be a little bit more constructive about what's our benefits 3-5 years down the line, how we're going to know we've got there. So that's been a big learning curve for us as well. So it's been very kind of like messy, I think was the word that we've talked about when we've come together before to talk about it. It's messy, but at the moment that's okay, because nobody really knows what an ICS is and does. We've only just had all the chief executive officers into post. You know, they're going to start in shadow in January. Just noticed there in the chat, Rachel Walker-Warcroft. Yes, the greener, we have a greener ICS program that sits within the system portfolio. That's one of the 16, and they are starting to have a look now at benefits and what they're going to capture. So yeah, and as I say, if anyone's interested in what we're doing or how we're doing, there's been the mistakes we've made, so that you don't have to make the same ones, you know, by all means, you know, be involved in the network, you know, contact us, contact myself, and I'd be happy to talk to you. But I would say that's probably kind of where we've come from. I think the only thing I would add to that is from an assurance perspective, where we have things in the system transformation portfolios that are assured at a regional and national level. So say, for example, learning disability and autism, local maternity services, things like that. We don't get so much involved in that assurance, because why double the assurance demand when it's already being done? We just tap into what's already been done. And the kind of mantra that we've come up with as a PMO is not to duplicate assurance. And the mantra we very much work to is lightest touch for most control. If it's already being assured, send us that paperwork. Don't do it again with a system logo on it. I think that's kind of it for me for the minute.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. And so I guess I could quite easily say that I'm in a very, our ICS is in a very similar situation. I think messy is the right word. My view of our ICS and the PMO within our ICS is I come from the other side, if you like, from Rachel. I'm in the acute provider. I'm head of PMO in our largest provider in our ICS, and yet I don't really have visibility of what the PMO or the proposed PMO structure is going to be in our ICS, and how that will work. At the moment, within our ICS, it seems to be very much operationally led. So a lot of the system-wide meetings that are taking place to review the transformation program, to review the governance and the reporting, is very much operationally led. There is a transformation delivery unit team that's part of the CCG that's starting to support the production and the control around a lot of the transformation plan on a page documents that they're drafting out to prioritise. But from my perspective, it's difficult to see how that all links together and how the governance works. I've sat on several meetings with the system to review the elective recovery programme or our urgent care programme, and the links in those programmes are becoming more and more tied into what's happening across the system to be able to deliver our programmes. It's now getting to a point as to how do we make sure that we're not doing that duplication, and that we're not providing additional governance and assurance. We need to get the model right without providing that duplication, but also we need to make sure that there's the visibility and that there's that we're all going in the same direction. We're all still independent organisations. We're all still drafting our own transformation plans, but we need to ensure that they're all aligned to the system plan, and that they're all being monitored and tracked in line, and that we're measuring the same things, and that we're driving it in the same direction. I know that I've seen a comment from Mike Jones, who's in our local CSU, with a statement to say that he's not entirely sure if or where they fit in to that model as well, because I know we've got PMOs there's a good sized PMO in the CSU. We've got a PMO in our in the other provider organisations that are neighbouring trusts, and as I say, there's a structure in the CCG, but at the moment we're not all joined up. I think it's probably the fairest way to put it. I think our challenge, personally, is to start driving that ourselves. So there's nothing to stop our PMOs coming together and starting to drive some of that from within, and rather than waiting for that to happen either to us or with us. So I'm not going to sort of bore you anymore. I don't think. I think it'd be nice to open up and to get people's views in terms of, if anyone's willing to talk about their current situation, their view of their shift to an ICS, their involvement in that. It would be great to hear if anyone's got any insight into whether they would like to be involved in a network group moving forward, ideas for areas of focus. We know we've got such things as the capability framework that Mike has led on. That's a fantastic tool that we'd like to be able to use in our organisations. We've also got the PMO toolkit that's been developed and rolled out, and again, we could look to extend and develop that for a specific focus on ICSs. But really, what we want to understand is what you guys out there think would be the benefits in terms of focus and attention. So I know we've had lots of comments going through, and
we have Gareth. What I've been doing is, as I've been sort of seeing certain things, is putting them into Cube, and probably what we can do what I'd like to do at the end is just tell a story from people's comments and from what I'm capturing, and then share that back to people, and just sort of, so there's some harmony of language and things. So, but as Gareth said, if you want to sort of, this is an opportunity. I know we're looking at the chat, and Tara, if you want to have a look at any of the questions to pull out, but if anyone wants to come and share their story, as Rachel and Gareth have, I think it's a good opportunity to do that.
We have a question for Rachel. Can you say a bit more about the process you followed on developing the outcomes framework?
Okay, so our original outcomes framework was developed by two of the directors at that time in our sustainable transformation plan. We were STPs before we became ICSs. So basically what they did was they started off, they took the triple aim from our local strategy of our outcomes. So we started off with our triple aim for the population. They then identified sort of 10 sort of key areas that would help to deliver that aim. And they then started to look underneath for what metrics did we already capture, did we already measure through sort of performance management and so on, across the system that fitted into this. So, and they came up with several hundred metrics, about 2/3 of which were easy to measure, and there were quite a few there that were obsolete. So that's how they built it. We need to refresh it. It's kind of gone. It's sort of served its purpose at the time, but now needs to be refreshed in a number of ways. Firstly, it's very health centric, very health focused. So we need to have a think about how we bring in local authority metrics into that that make a difference. We also need to think about how we make use of a lot of the qualitative stuff that gets collected through the councils, through the annual surveys, and how we feed that in, because we're very much missing compelling stories in there. It's very much, the chunky day-to-day data that we use. And then the other area where we need to refresh the outcomes framework is, as we're starting to look at how we define benefits across the programs and how we're actually going to measure those, looking at where the benefits map into our outcomes framework, and we are finding quite a lot of gaps, particularly sort of around efficiency of patient journey. A lot of opportunities have accelerated through COVID, like they have for many other areas, you know, video consultations, patient initiated follow-up, all the things that are in the elective recovery plan. So we need to do a big update of the outcomes framework, you know, but it started from a top down, from the strategy, and went down. And I would say potentially another weakness possibly in hindsight was we looked at what we already had instead of thinking about what we actually needed. So we've got a really good opportunity at the moment to build it from the bottom up, really, from the benefits that are going to come out of our key programs, and stack it up in that direction. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that benefit piece is really key. I think, again, another common theme through a lot of the discussions that we've had in the peer-to-peer groups and previous sessions have been around that. I think we've all sort of held our hands up and said that the NHS is not necessarily the best at managing benefits and measuring benefits, and we've delivered, you know, we deliver projects. And we're very good at delivering projects. A lot of those projects we have to deliver. There's no option. We're not doing it because it's a nice thing to do. It's something that has to be done. And I think for that reason, we do forget the benefit side of it sometimes, and we don't do that sort of full circle back in terms of, well, why did we do it, other than just because we were told we had to do it. I've just seen Mike Lewis put a comment in. It'd be good. I will pick on Mike if Mike's willing to give us a little bit of an insight into what's happening up in Mid York. That would be good if you're there, Mike.
So much trying to eat my dinner in peace.
Sorry, Mike.
Get the typing, Mike.
No, I was just thinking, it's when you actually look at the details of what's in the white paper about setting up an ICS, each ICS has got a certain degree of autonomy as to what they do. So you're not going to have any two ICSs the same. So you could easily get into a world that's going to spiral off into, well, you can't really have an ICS PMO group because what we're doing up here is different to what you're doing down there. And but it's just trying to pick out that commonality and keep that going forward, rather than trying to use all the differences as a barrier to moving this group forward and using it. Because I think there's going to be a lot of really useful, interesting stuff that we can all share amongst each other.
Yeah. That's a massively valid point. I mean, we're definitely not going to see a consistent or a common approach to what the PMO model is going to look like inside an ICS. Some of them are going to have a centralised ICS PMO, and we know that a lot of them necessarily specifically won't not have a function in the ICS that's named the PMO. They're going to keep PMOs in the standalone organisations, but we need to find a way of working together to deliver exactly the same, don't we? And yeah, that's a really valid point, Mike.
I'm going to go finish my sandwich now.
Go on. What you got?
Pardon?
What have you got?
Oh, nothing aside, just a sandwich and some soup.
Thanks, Mike.
Very nice.
We have a question about branding. The difficulties that are being experienced when trying to pull together organisations with different email addresses, and they want to know if this is something that's going to be looked at.
Oh, I don't know, but yeah, that is a kind of a really good point. I guess it depends on kind of what your comms team are doing. Yeah, I actually don't know. I would literally have to pluck one of our comms team in to answer that. I know that we've because we were one of the accelerator sites initially for accountable care systems that became the STPs, etc. We've always had our comms team at STP and ICS level, so I think they've been there doing that for quite a while, so it's not so much of a new problem. But if you want me to link you into our director of comms to kind of talk about what they did and how they've done it, I'd be happy to connect you.
Yeah,
go ahead, Sarah. Yeah,
I think the email issue is it is a real issue, and we've had people throughout our ICS. We've had people obviously going on to comments and swapping, sitting in other organisations, and it causes yeah, it causes chaos. It'd be lovely if we were all on the .NET email.
Wouldn't it?
Sarah,
Sorry.
share your experience. We've obviously read your comment, but just tell us what it's like, because it.
Yes, it's extremely challenging to be
I can
fair.
imagine, yeah.
I mean, I work as the ICS project manager, and I'm particularly in the field of mental health support teams in schools. So actually that's driven really not by SPFT at all, which is Sussex Partnership Foundation Trust. It's not the acute care that's dealing with it at all, but I have an SPFT email address, and that in itself is not a door opener. That is actually a door closer to some of the information that is super important to be realizing what the benefits are of what we're doing, and actually even trying to explain what an ICS is. And my program manager has just come into post, and she is also struggling with helping people to understand the brand of ICS. Especially within the mental health support teams in schools, because as I said, that's driven really by local authority and Department of Education and HEE and the universities and, you know, local government. We've got, particularly in my area, we've got three project groups within the localities, and then you have myself and the program lead, and then my program lead for the ICS, which covers everything for Sussex. So it's quite a big thing, and obviously trying to get people to understand and then engage and then share, which is the most important thing, is quite tricky when you haven't a simple thing as an SPFT address. So that was one of those things I would really appreciate if that was considered. When I agree with the previous person, I think it was Mike, who said about, you know, we do have a certain degree of autonomy as an ICS in each locality, but actually that would be super helpful if we didn't have autonomy about the email address and it was just a .NET address, because I just think that would then bring down quite a few barriers to the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, it's funny. I was in a meeting last week, and the chap was describing his issues with gathering GP feedback, and they're not using their correct email address and using their .NET address, and it was it has a huge impact.
Yes, it just sounds like something really small, doesn't it?
It does.
We're thinking about branding and we're thinking about engagement, and absolutely, you know, thinking about what the benefits are of what we're doing and who we're working for and who we, you know, what we're working towards. It's so those little things are the things that are important. Those are the things that can make or break us, I think, as an organisation. So, well, we're not an organisation, are you? That's the thing. We're not an organisation yet. So that's the tricky bit, isn't it? So that just on the ground, that for me is the biggest issue, you know. So, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sarah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks. I think there are a number of cultural barriers as well, aren't there, that go hand in hand with that. That we're not a single organisation, and we never will be. Having said that, we need to be working together, sort of hand in hand, and some of those challenges around, like I say, the visibility of what's happening across the other organisations, and the transformational projects that are taking place in the other organisations. Ultimately, like I said at the beginning, they should all be aligned to the strategic objectives of the ICS. And if there are 6 projects over there that are supporting one work stream, and there are another couple of projects over there in another organisation, then it's about making sure that they're aligned and they've got visibility to each other, because there's no point us continuing to work in silos. And if it's a barrier as easy as an email address, you know, that's not a good place to start, when what we want to be doing is to be encouraging the organisations to work together. We almost should be working as one, although we are independent.
I think bringing it back to the theme of the today, change management. It's what change management approaches can we use and adopt that can enable behavioural, cultural, people change? Because I think from my limited experience of ICSs, it's about people, isn't it? And accelerating the relationships and the partnerships we have with people. So if it's harmonizing the language or the technology, it's the people behind it that can make that work. So I'm going to share something in the chat around change management. It's a guide essentially, and you can access this on the platform, but I'll put it in the chat for you to have a look at, because it's a massive guide and it's useful for those that are just starting out on change management.
So while you're doing that, Mike, it was just while we've been talking, something occurred to me, that there's almost like the missing bit of ICSs that we haven't mentioned yet, because I guess it's not 100% PMO relevant at the moment. And that is the driver behind it. One of the big drivers is about population health management. So that is part of the reason why ICSs, ICBs now are being structured the way that they are. So, so rather than it just being sort of health needs are done at such a high level, it gives us an opportunity to take things down and actually be more flexible on a population-based level. So within each ICS, ICSB, ICS board, however we're going to be framed on the 1st of April, we then have what we did call localities, which are areas of your geographical makeup that sort of come together, and that is very much driven on the primary care side. So if you start down at the bottom of the GP practice, you have got a group of local to each other GP practices that are forming what we've known as primary care networks, which you've probably come across before because they're not changing. And that's a population of about 30 to 50,000. So that's the sort of how it all is, right down on the footprint, if you like. Then those primary care networks group up together. At the moment, they're called localities, but they're moving to place-based care. So they place-based care populations, PCB, I can't keep up with it at the moment, but they're changing from localities to place-based something in recognition of it's about the local population. We've currently got 3 of those, with a 4th one coming in because Bassett Law is joining us from Yorkshire. And kind of the idea of thinking about it in that kind of way is I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to be knocking around in health authority days. And the way that we kind of looked at it in those days was we would get our sort of priorities that would come in from the World Health Organization at a national level. Then Public Health would decide what they were for, the UK. Then they would come down to Lancashire and South Cymru, which is where I worked at the time. And our Director of Public Health would decide what our local priorities were within that. And then we would go on down. And the idea is around this place-based care is that at each level, it gives an opportunity to tweak the priorities slightly or add in some local ones so that we can be delivering the national asks, but we can also very much be looking at what we need for our local populations and really start to bring in the sort of nuance that you need from your local demographics. So there's a big driver for that on the other side as well. And I think we don't talk enough about the population health management because we're always having to look at, winter pressures and, elective recovery. And when we forget about there's all that side of it as well. From a PMO perspective, what's that mean? I mean, they're small, they can't afford their own PMOs. So I suspect at some point we will have to have a look at, they're doing all their own transformation programs as well. So, do we PMO for them? But that's a step to come, I think, once we're actually running in shadow form and really thinking about, what's this look like?
We have a question now with regards to might an opportunity for PMO, however it is structured, to be model for distributed leadership in ICS. Did that make sense?
It does make sense, and I would say yes. But it's getting everyone. It's just being able to kind of get everyone together. We've got all the same problems at a PMO perspective that we have across the system of where organisations are currently at. It's no partnership comes together seamlessly, but that would be the ideal that we lead by example. How are you finding that sort of kind of thing going, Gareth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's culture, isn't it? I think we're looking at a completely new way of working, and that needs to be. We need to be sort of led by example, don't we? We need the execs, we need the senior managers to be driving that sort of cohesion, that collaboration, if you like, between our organisations to support that approach. I think one of the comments that's a bit further up, I think, mentioned around the culture and the shift to working together as one, and some of that can be supported through project management and program management in terms of reporting and making sure that we've got visibility and that we're, I think, Rachel, I think you touched on it early on around not having to reproduce, reports. The reports that we provide internally on our elective program and on our urgent care program, we share those now through to the system boards, and that insight, and if we start getting access to that level of reporting from other organisations, then that's a big step in terms of understanding what's happening elsewhere. Because yes, it's great having the exec cited on that, and in the system board meetings, but us as the people being responsible for delivering projects and programs within organisations aren't necessarily always cited on that, and I think we need to be that needs to filter down, but we can support that and put some of that in place to help to provide that link. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but
okay. The next question is with regards to. It says, if the objective is for the system to work to deliver shared outcomes, then the role of an ICS PMO seems to be twofold: the governance and accountability side, but coupled with the enabling capability side.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. We have got a capability development program where we're actually looking at, what are the training needs that we need. So we're looking at skilling up our project and program management workforce. And not surprisingly, benefits management is one of the things that's near the top of the list, getting some training in around that. I think risk management as well, because we are now having to think about it in longer term, and we're having to think about things wider than the immediate operational delivery risks. So there's some scope there, and we're also looking at, trying to formalise some qualifications and experience for our project and programme managers, because they're still in the same boat that one day you find project manager appears in your job description and off you go, but we need to back it up for people, with some capability and some skills and some support, and for the PMO and anyone who's seen me in any of these previous Compass days know that I'm very passionate about coaching and mentoring, and I feel there's very much a role for the PMO in there in coaching and mentoring people through that process. Yeah,
and that is a real opportunity for these networks. So that we're already seeing that sort of capability and development opportunities coming through the networks. We've got the access to the apprenticeships that were launched earlier in the year. We've shared quite a few different freely available project management, change management type courses, and the power of these networks is that we can share that resource, and that we can build upon that, and I think that's definitely a focus area for any of these networks. And if we specifically focusing on the ICS view, then we can share obviously everything that we've got through that group as well. It's definitely about capability and development there.
So I was just going to say as well that we're just embarking on getting cohorts together for the Level 7 Systems Thinking apprenticeship. So there are apprenticeships other than the project management ones as well, and we think that the Level 7 is going to be, something that's really helpful to a lot of our, middle and senior leaders.
Yeah, that systems thinking one is that's I'm signing up for that one, Rachel.
Yeah.
That's yeah, definitely something that I'd encourage people looking at, because it's all about thinking and problem solving at a system level.
Yeah, I'll pop the lunch and learn I gave about systems thinking, because it is, that unintentional consequences that come from something you're on with. Okay, so I've emailed that document that people can't access out, and I'm sure there's a way of just sharing that easier in an easy way, but I'm sure I'll figure that out. Should I sort of replay back what I've captured, Gareth? Would that be useful?
Yeah, Mike, that'd be really good. And I'm just wondering, could we post one of our email addresses and just ask anybody who is interested in getting involved in a network group to just drop us an email on one of our email addresses, so that we can start developing that group, and then we'll access everybody.
Yeah, I'll pop the NHS Project Futures email in there, Gareth, to save you and Rachel and others receiving emails, and I can kind of coordinate it from there if you like, and at least then you can focus on when you would like to bring people together.
Perfect. And if people can just drop an email to there and just reference the ICS group, and then we'll pick that up.
Basically, very much what everyone has.
Sorry, Robert, I need to put you on mute there.
No problem at all. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Is that Joss?
I think it's
Talking.
Robert. It's Robert Mays. He's all right. Sounds like he's on a meeting.
Robert.
Okay, just a quick. You may have seen Cube. Some of you. We do a lot of the planning in Cube, and actually this is where we planned out today's events, believe it or not. But I've just captured some thoughts. So this is a board. I have changed it slightly. It's called Here to There planning. So it talks about the state that the current state, the future state, some opportunities and challenges. I've actually just put some stickies over here because it actually describes something slightly differently. But what I've tried to do is just bring together some of the thoughts from the cloud and what's been in the chat and what Rachel and Gareth have described, and others that have contributed. So where are we at the moment here? There are sort of things being tested out and piloted at the moment. Rachel's described one example of the hub and spoke model that's in development at the moment. So things are being tested, and I think there's an opportunity to do that. Things are really uncertain. Things are really foggy at the moment and quite confusing for people. But it's okay not to have something fully formed at the moment, because change is messy. And we're just starting on that journey at the moment, and everyone is currently at different starting points. But I saw in the chat earlier someone saying that they felt comforted by what they'd heard from what you described today, so that it is bringing comfort to people. It is vague, I think, for people, and there is a level of complexity, and it's quite complicated. So where do we want to get to? I think it's from what I've read, being clear about what the end goal is and having some clarity, building a vision, building a roadmap, and trying things out that create positive action. And you can do that by contributing to what Gareth is leading on, which is the ICS PMO network. And this is just the starting point for that. There's an opportunity to harmonize some of the approaches and lessons that others have used, and that includes the starting point and some of the models that have been looked at currently. And potentially you can piggyback on some of the things that are already happening in your organization or where you work currently, and focus on some activities that you do have influence over at the moment. And some of those could be just small steps, but it's about having a voice and learning from each other and feeling connected and having some freedom and autonomy to feel brave and informed enough to make those first steps, and that there is some governance and reporting that we can influence over this. Challenges, there's lots of them. Culturally, it's a massive shift that's required to be ICS ready. there are some neglected partners. Some of those could be seen as local authorities and social care stakeholders. So we need to get closer to those groups of people. And upskilling in the system, your teams that you manage, the directorates that you sit in, there's some upskilling that's required alongside all of this. And a lot of questions remain unanswered. Things like this email, it is having huge impact on people's time and effort. Messages aren't getting out there. So how do we transform policy into action and make funding decisions that work for us? And we don't want the CCGs to be the same thing under a different name. We want it to be make meaningful change and to be able to track the benefits and measure the deliveries and factor in social mobility and the things that Rachel described, that socioeconomic impacts. And that's it. So hopefully that was useful.
Really useful, thanks, Mark. And I think it's that acknowledging that the endpoint is going to be different for everybody as well. There's going to be no two systems. To Mike Lewis's point earlier, there's going to be no two systems that look the same. That's great, Mike. Thank you. We are out of time. I think it's bang on one now, and there's obviously more sessions coming up. So I think really just from me, just to say thank you for everybody who has joined, and obviously I hope it was useful. It was comforting for us, I think, firstly to see so many people, but also to get the similar shared opinions and views. And we'll try and get in touch with all those who've commented and shared as soon as we can, and look to get something set up.
And thanks for all the thought-provoking questions and kind of openness and honesty about what's going on, because as I commented in chat, for me it's really important for us to feel reassured from each other that it's a mess and we're working it out as we go along, but it's the same for all of us.
Thanks very much, Gareth, Rachel, for your comments, Tara for checking on the chat, and for everyone that's had a voice today. So have great afternoons. Look forward to the next session if you can make it. We have the Agile Change Management with Mel Franklin kicking off at 1:30. So go get some lunch and join Mel for that session when you can.